Hello and welcome. What does stories say? I'm Dr. Pauline Baird, cultural bearer from the village of Buxton, Guyana. And as you know, I tell stories. I tell our family histories, our whispered stories, our hidden, practiced, lost and sometimes forgotten traditions. Loud talk story. This is Book It, the section on What does Stories Say, where I feature a book. And I am extremely pleased to present a book by a Buxtonian, a roots man, a man of the people, a Eusi Kwayana. And his book is called Buxton Friendship in Print and Memory. I've read this book so many times. I've marked up so many nice spots that speak to me. Get this book. Bring your children. The reason Kwayana is important to us because he brings us our history over 90 plus years. You know, he's 96. He was born in 1925. And let me tell y'all, Kwayana sharp like a tack. The other day he gave me a phone number of somebody who wanted to talk to me. He read off the number. He said, I write it down, He said, I know it from my brain. I memorized it. I said, Kwayana, when I grow up, I want to be like you. You know, we laugh and say. He said, this time in a long time. Anyhow, I want to bring this book to you. You see, we in the village, 50-somethings and 60-somethings and so on, we would have had Kwayana walking down the street. We would have seen him, say good morning to him. Little children know that when Kwayana passing, you don't say bad word. Because the only bad word Kwayana does say confounded nonsense. That's it. He's revered. We call him the Buxton Sage, or the Sage of Buxton. You see, Kwayana has opened a door for many of us. We who have come after him telling the stories of our village. And this work that I do is a direct result of a challenge he put out. And I'm going to read it in this book. You see, when Kwayana wrote this book, it's a compilation of his stories, his lived experiences among people who have told their stories. You know, when I first got this book, I went back to the village. I think I was abroad doing something or other. And somebody gave me the book. My name is in the book, Yes. This man got lists of all those Buxtonians who've achieved, whatever you've done. If you were a teacher at that time, it's in there. Nurse, doctors, whoever, grave digger, carpenter, your name in this book. When I first read the book, to be honest, I didn't appreciate it at the time. I think I was a little stupid. Yeah, I was educated wrong. You see, I was educated to know all the details about British history and to some extent Caribbean history, but never the history of Buxton. Never. And when you go to school, your school is a certain way. You expect when you do research, it has to be documented in the MLA or the APA or whatever. People, get this book. But if you're expecting APA and MLA and those doorkeeping and controlling of information ways that the academy perpetuate, it's not in this book. This book is written with an academic touch, with a village focus, with an embracing mandate, and it has smackings. I could hear the ways we tell story. I could hear them say story in here. I could hear what is story saying here. Those local ways and frameworks of telling story, they're all in here. So the older I've become and the more I've been studying, I've grown to love this book. I've grown to appreciate this book more. Because this book tells me that I can write our history. I don't have to be a scholar to write our history. You don't have to be that academic scholar, trained with bachelor's degree and whatever else. If you have that, that's fine. But Kwayana is saying that we can write our own histories, and that's a mandate for all of us. And he gives us a very humble but yet fascinating window of what this history is. It is complex, it is rich and beautiful. I hear the statesman in here. I hear the father in here. I hear the griot in here. I hear the history keeper in here. And I hear the man who is witty as ever in here. Sharp like a tack. Yes. And one of the chapters I'm going to read from a little bit is called Toilers, of all callings. And I set this up to give you an idea of why this book is important. As a village rhetorician, which I call myself, this is very important. This book, he said, it is the work of all kinds of toilers that makes society go round. A history of any village, like Buxton Friendship, will not be a history without some attempt to give the names of those who have labored at various occupations and activities to keep the community and themselves going. In the village life, even the names of the eminent and outstanding sons and daughters tend to be forgotten. It is the names of those who have hit the national scene that tend to live on even within the confines of the village. The big trees under which the elders were accustomed to meet keen-eyed listeners and talk about the past are falling. The Kumaka tree, now you know, it done fall down too, yeah. The elders themselves are moving off the scene. Memories fade. Local events become swamped in the world news and begin to seem as a record of primitive, backward, instructive, but time-wasting. Elders, where they can be found, have to dig deep into the sleeping part of their memories and often have to be persuaded that the old time happenings have meaning. In the world as it is, where New York and Toronto and Canada and London are the places where Caribbeans make their home, families want to hear about the village, but it has to, the story has to spread far and wide in various places. So he said, in compiling this book, you know, with an international community with members who are far scattered in distant parts of the earth, it's a monumental task. And to do it without a budget for phone interviews and travel and other communication was a forbidding task. But I'm glad he did it. He said, and to some degree, it was a reckless undertaking. He kind of poked fun at himself. This effort has been promoted or supported by charity of the dedicated band of villagers, the Greens, and the non-villagers with limited resources who themselves have no idea what it ought to cost. And here is the beautiful part of it. You see this book here? It opens doors for generations to come. That's why I love this book. This is not an holy man book where I am the authority on everything Buxtonian in here and the rest of people just count for chopped liver. No! He opened the door. He said, it yet remains important to set down the names of men and women, farmers, workers, professionals, whose activities at many times do not count, so that the work can at some point serve as material for real history. Real history, Kwayana, I got a problem with this. This is real history, yes. The younger generation, people like me, the younger generation and people like you and your children's children will no doubt accept the challenge in this and other villages and write the history that is most vital to us, the history of ourselves. Kwayana said what we must write the history of ourselves. And for this reason, what is stories to exist, so that we can write a history for ourselves. Some of you don't want to read it, so I can talk it. Some of you want to read it, so I can write it. Many of us know many sides of Kwayana, and sometimes you don't get his witty side. But in this book, some of his witty sides come out. Bring the pic to them, I come and sit down. This is story sweet. Anthony Gordon was a highly skilled boiler maker who deserved grouping among the folk figures of Buxton, not because of any endearment between him and the people, but because his wealth exceeded his common sense, and the airs he assumed rendered him ridiculous. Anthony Gordon, it was said, he had the biggest house in Buxton and Friendship, so big it had 100 windows. The story goes that when the governor came to Buxton, he blocked up one of the windows. This, of course, was what children accepted as truth in those days. Whether it was true or not, it was handed down to the children. And the 100 windows belief is not only confined to Buxton. Now, Anthony Gordon, being one of the upper tens among Africans, had his own horse and carriage. But at the time of the tale, he did not have enough money to have a groom and a stable attendant. Buxton had stable and thing. One day, on returning from a jaunt, he saw a youth and called out to him, "Come here, release that quadruped from its vehicle, stimulate and give provender, and when you have accomplished your laborious task, I will recompense you." Dumbfounded, the youth answered, "Sir, what you say?" Mr. Gordon replied impatiently in the common tongue, "Loose the horse, cut the grass, and feed it, and I'll give you pay." When the youth had completed the job, he could not find Mr. Anthony Gordon anywhere. So, Anthony Gordon, you see, had retreated to his upper room and could not be disturbed. Next day, no doubt his mother, waiting for the coppers, took the youth and approached Mr. Gordon. This time they found him relaxing in a chair on the open veranda. He shouted, "Mr. Gordon, Mr. Gordon, give me my money." Mr. Gordon, disturbed and annoyed, got up, changed his slippers for boots, kicked the lad firmly in the hindquarters. The youth yelled and disappeared in fury. The scene changed at the Vigilance Magistrate Court. Mr. Gordon was the defendant on an assault charge. Playing to the class sympathies of the magistrate, Mr. Gordon proceeded with his defense. "Your worship, on the day in question, I was relaxing in my double-seated, double-twisted wild cane chair, perusing some books which I had brought with me from England, such as Wordsworth and Shakespeare and the men of that caliber, when I heard a voice shouting, 'Mr. Gordon, Mr. Gordon, give me my money, give me my money.' Your worship, I arose. I took off my 2.5 pounders and I put on my 10.5 pounders, and I associated my shoemaker with his tail with such a force that the little urchin yelled in pain. Now, your worship, ain't that good talk?" "Yes, Mr. Gordon, very good talk. And for your good talk, you will pay a fine of $5 and $5 compensation to the complainant. No time to pay." Not one to lose face, Mr. Gordon turned and summoned a villager in the courtroom. "Come, go to my wife, Mrs. Gordon. Tell her to look in the waistcoat pocket of the suit, not the one I wore this morning, nor the one I wore yesterday, nor the one I wore the day before yesterday, nor the one I wore the previous day. Fetch me $10. After a moment, he hurried out to the platform of the court and clapped the villager back. Come, come, come. Hey, tell me wife, and she catch 2 fowl and 2 duck and sell them quick for me. Me the bad." That's the story Kwayana tell. Before the episode, Mr. Gordon had made a name for himself on the East Coast Railway as a first-class passenger. Waving proudly at the chimneys he had erected on the sugar estate, he boasted, "Behold my handiwork! Had it not been for the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob and the God of Abraham, I would have drowned out the heavens in smoke." When Mr. Gordon died, it was not known by anyone living when it happened. He may have left the scene from the sound of things and lived somewhere else. We don't know. But he was still remembered as a folk figure after the Second World War, even today. If you would like to hear more stories that Kwayana has to share, join us on Zoom this evening, New York time, 4:30 to 6:30, and he will tell us more stories in his own words. And if you like what you hear, like and follow and join me. Next month we will have another section of Book It, where I will feature another Guyanese author. Yawa good.